2 desks away from Sarah's, the little girl heard a crash. Then, ugh! Quickly looking up, she saw Mrs. Sparrow falling over a chair which was pushed out from the desk. The elderly teacher fell face first into the tiled floor and slid a few feet into a desk. Hello, you are listening to In My Words. The book I am reading from is titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles. This book is not intended for young readers. After each reading session, I will briefly give information about a chosen plant. I hope through my words you will gain insight, knowledge, and a deeper appreciation and understanding of this mysterious and intricate world. Though the road may be long and hard, compassion and beauty can be gained through the enjoyment of nature and experiencing its wondrous gifts. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate all of you who are watching my videos. I never expected doing this at this stage of my life, but when circumstances demand, then it is important for me to create income where I can. Leaving a comment will help my videos get noticed more in the future and allow other people to view them. Also, purchasing one or both of my books will be very helpful. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sarah heard the school bell ring and the children began filing into the room. Recess was over. In 2 more hours, lunch would begin. The young girl was looking forward to lunch. Joe, Sissy, and Scott knew how good the school lunches were and had told Sarah, so she was excited for lunchtime. Although Sarah's 3 older siblings were at the same school, she would never get to see them during the school day, for their classes were on a different floor and at the other end of the building. While deep in thought, the lunch bell rang. "Get in line for lunch," Mrs. Sparrow said. "Hand me your ticket or money as you step into the hall. Be sure you wait there for me, and then we will walk to the lunchroom together." With the briefest of pauses, Sarah's teacher added, "And be quiet." After all the children were in the hallway standing in line, they proceeded to walk outside. Going to the crosswalk, they crossed the street with the help of a school crossing guard. Walking a quarter of a block more, they saw the rectory. The first boy in line was assigned with opening the door for the rest of the children as they went down the stairs and entered the cafeteria. The boy always waited for the last child and then finally the teacher to enter. Then he would follow behind the teacher. All the children could smell the mouth-watering aroma coming from the lunchroom, but for Sarah it meant even more. She would actually be able to have food. And although she might only have the food for 5 afternoons a week, it was better than the constant starvation she felt at home. Months went by and winter came. Another day of school was upon the young girl. Sarah entered the schoolroom as usual and sat at her desk. Mrs. Sparrow was beginning the day. Walking up and down each row, she glared at the children. She began to lay a piece of paper on the children's desks. Although she was a school teacher, she never really liked kids. They were such a bother to her. Tapping on one of the boys' desks, she pointed down at the paper which she had laid upon it and said, "If you don't get this test right," she looked up from the desk and around the room at the other children as she spoke, "you may not pass first grade. And if any of you cheat, you'll go to the principal's office and your parents will be called." Hesitating for effect, she added, "So don't copy someone else's paper." Sarah knew of 2 children from her kindergarten class that did not pass. One was a bit too young to continue on to first grade. The other one acted up too much. During her year, Sarah would come to know of several others who would not pass various other grades either. Therefore, when Mrs. Sparrow made the threat of not passing the school year, she meant it. After handing out all of the tests, she walked back to her desk. Several minutes later, Mrs. Sparrow walked up and down the rows again. "Keep your eyes on your own paper," she reminded the children. If she caught someone in the act of looking at another person's paper, she would take the ruler in her hand and rap his or her knuckles with it. Reaching Sarah's row, Mrs. Sparrow was doing a quick walkthrough. 2 desks away from Sarah's, the little girl heard a crash. Then, ugh! Quickly looking up, she saw Mrs. Sparrow falling over a chair which was pushed out from the desk. The elderly teacher fell face first into the tiled floor and slid a few feet into a desk. The blue-gray wig which she wore flew off her head and landed in the back of the room. Moments passed. No child made a sound. Mrs. Sparrow used the upturned chair for leverage as she pulled herself into a standing position. Her face began to turn black and blue almost immediately. Deep circles started to form under her eyes. Looking directly at Sarah, Mrs. Sparrow said in a high, screechy voice as she pointed to the offensive chair, "Who left this?" A long pause came as the bruised woman tried not to swear, her face becoming red with anger. She started again, still concentrating on Sarah. "Who left this chair in the middle of the aisle? Whoever did it is going to be severely punished." Fear sprang to Sarah's face as guilt consumed her. She knew she didn't do it, but for whatever reason, she always felt guilty for things she didn't do. If someone accused her of doing something that she didn't do, she would feel guilty. Now, not only did she feel guilty, fear also crept in. What would happen to her if Mrs. Sparrow actually thought she left the chair out? Would she have to go to the principal's office? Being so young, Sarah had no idea of the possibilities that could be brought about for such a deed. "I'm going to get the principal," announced Mrs. Sparrow. "Don't make a sound while I'm gone, and don't get out of your desks." All the children were silent and frightened as Mrs. Sparrow left the room. Several minutes later, the teacher was back, and so too was the principal. "Whoever did this had better confess," Principal Sister Georgie yelled as she shook her long bent finger accusingly at the class. Some children started to cry. Others said nothing at all. Sarah felt as if the brunt of the culpability was being directed at her. However, the child had to be strong and not show any emotion. She didn't want to be punished or blamed for something she didn't do. Since no one admitted to the incident, Sister Georgia said, "Mrs. Sparrow will be out of the class for a few weeks. She will have a replacement. When Mrs. Sparrow gets back, you children will be on your best behavior for the rest of the year, or there will be consequences." She turned on her heel and walked out of the room with Mrs. Sparrow, leaving the children to wonder what the rest of their day would consist of. The day finally passed, and Sarah was relieved that she didn't get in trouble for the incident, for she did nothing wrong. It just felt that way. A substitute teacher was brought in for the children until Mrs. Sparrow returned to school. The elderly woman never found out who left the chair in the middle of the aisle, and Sarah never knew either. Today's highlighted plant is Amaranth. Amaranth is a stunning plant, especially the Hopi red dye variety. Many plants are able to be used as a natural dye. The difference about the Hopi amaranth is the color of the whole plant. It is very striking with its deep red to almost purple color. The leaves, stems, and seeds, and purportedly the roots, are edible. I don't have experience with eating or using the roots, so I am unable to talk about that area. However, with the leaves, especially the young, tender ones, they can be cooked and used as you would with spinach. It's best if you cook the leaves first, for they are tough. The stems can also be cooked, like spinach. By cooking the leaves and stems, it will make it easier for a person to digest and thus allows the body to consume the nutrients much better. The leaves and stems can also be dried and powdered and added to smoothies. The seeds are also edible. However, they do require a need for processing before consumption. The seeds can be popped like popcorn or can be used to thicken soups, for it has a mucilaginous texture. Because of its gelatinous, it can be unappetizing when eaten like gruel or oatmeal, but many people still eat it in this way. It all comes down to personal preference. The seeds are ready for harvest when they are black, hard, and fall from the flower heads easily. The seeds should be screened to remove the seed from the flower. Next comes the winnowing, which is a way to separate the loose flower bits from the seed. This can be done in a number of ways. One is by blowing gently across the seeds and allowing the flower bits to drift off. Another way is to use a fan And the last way that I know of for winnowing is to use a round, flat, pizza-shaped pan and gently flip its contents in the air and allow the breeze to take away the unwanted bits. Depending on who you ask or where you find your literature, some people recommend soaking the harvested and winnowed seeds for 12 hours. After that, it is rinsed, drained, and then cooked or dried for later use, such as for popping or for use which is similar to the preparation of quinoa. The seeds are high in protein. Amaranth is not a grain and it contains no gluten. It is one of the original non-grain options for baking bread. The seeds are cooked just like rice, which means 1 cup of seed to 2 cups of water. I hope you learned something about amaranth today and will give it a try. Please like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to having you join me again next time, where I will highlight another plant, and I will continue to read from the book titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles, which you can purchase from Amazon.com. Thank you for having joined me.